Talking sports with Nooner and Force back once again. This time we are on a Sunday afternoon, a special Sunday afternoon. The only time we ever really record on Saturdays when on Sundays is when we absolutely have to. Selection Sunday, we will bring you coverage on Selection Sunday and our thoughts and everything like that for the NCAA tournament, just like we have done the last couple of years. This time it is for the college football playoff, as well as some of the bowl games that have been announced. All of them have not been announced yet. We do know some of them. And so, but before we get started, Brad, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing very well. I'm sitting here relaxing. Got had a great Sunday at church. We got a budget for 2024, so I'm getting paid. So I'm doing pretty good.
There you go. You can't, yeah, say can't argue with that one, I guess. And so, definitely cannot argue with that one. So, all right, so let's get to business before like I said, church, like I said, I had a church today as well. We had all kinds of stuff going on today. And so before we get to the top four, let's go ahead and do some. These are the bowls that they have announced. Arkansas State will play in the Camilla Bowl in Montgomery, Alabama, December the 23rd against Northern Illinois. And that should be a very good matchup. I
Yeah.
believe So, quick story about Northern Illinois, Brad. Um, so Jacob on the Terrible Football Show, Northern Illinois was the first college football game he ever saw in person. And so he's taken Northern Illinois as a very, very good. I believe he said it was Northern Illinois. I need to ask him for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's the story behind his fanship with Northern Illinois. And so we will announce that. That will go ahead and announce that. That is the day before Christmas Eve. That would be a great day to travel, Brad.
That would be a great day to travel.
Hint, hint, hint. We need to go to the Camilla Bowl.
Hey,
It's
in
only
Mobile,
it's only 7.5 hours from where I live. So
yeah.
you just come on over, and we will travel 7.5 hours to watch Arkansas State play the Camilla Bowl. Shelby will even she would love to come with us. She loves Arkansas State University. She would love to come with us. My wife, on the other hand,
Hazel
I'm not so
actually,
sure.
Hazel actually come with me too. My
So
wife
there you
wouldn't
go.
probably wouldn't come. So there you
That's
go.
okay. There you go. We'll take the girls. We'll just take the
There you go.
girls. Yeah,
There you
we'll be
go.
dead. There you go. All right. What about Paisley? Will she go?
Oh yeah, Hazel will go.
So there you
She
go.
won't admit it,
We'll
but
just take.
she'll go. Yeah.
She won't what now?
She won't admit it, but she will go.
Yeah. If she'll go see a Jessieville game, she'll definitely come see this. This is much better than the Jessieville football. Let's see here. All right, so here are the bowls that I know that have been announced so far. This was the one I was hoping Arkansas State would get this one, and that was the in the Caesar Superdome, the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. That was the one that I was hoping they would get for. This is going to be a good matchup too. Jacksonville State and Louisiana, which previously was Louisiana Lafayette.
Yes.
They will play next Saturday. Another interesting matchup: UCLA against Boise State. This is for the Starco Brands Bowl in Los Angeles. Well, actually, it's Inglewood, California. Same thing. Western Kentucky against Old Dominion and the famous Toastery Bowl. What the hell? Anyway, the famous, famous
Famous toast.
Toastery Bowl. Okay. The Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl, James Madison against Air Force, would have been a lot better had Air Force finished out a season strong. James Madison, of course, they did lose their head coach. This is being played in Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah.
The Idaho Potato Bowl, Georgia State against Utah. None of them have anything to do with potatoes. Coastal Carolina against San Jose. This is the Hawaii Bowl. Oh, that'd be a great one for Alex, and it's probably the cheapest game you can go to in Hawaii. Hawaii's expensive. The First Responder Bowl will be Texas State against Rice. That will be at Gerald Ford Stadium in Dallas. And then let's see here, the Alamo Bowl, Arizona against Oklahoma. Looking forward to that matchup. That will be played at the Alamodome in San Antonio, Texas. Memphis against Iowa State in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl. That's basically a home game
That's home
for
game.
Memphis, and so that should be a good matchup. And this one, Brad, I think to me right now, of all the bowl games that they've announced so far, this is the one I'm looking forward to the most. Missouri against Ohio State in Arlington for the Cotton Bowl. Oh my gosh, the heck with the other bowl. We're going to this bowl, Brad. I'm rooting for Missouri in
That-
this one. Sorry, Jacob. I'm rooting for Missouri. Jack is a big Ohio State fan. Let's see here. The Peach Bowl, Ole Miss against Penn State. That will be played in Atlanta, Georgia. The Music City Bowl in Nashville will be Auburn and Maryland. That'll be crappy. Georgia against Florida State. If Travis Hunter was, if Travis Hunter's playing, this would be a great game to watch. But no, it's not going to be a good game to watch at all. The Rely Quest Bowl, Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. That will feature Wisconsin and LSU. The Fiesta Bowl, I'm looking forward to this one as well, even though Bo Nix may not play, but this will be in Glendale, Arizona, Liberty, and
yeah.
Oregon. The Citrus Bowl, Iowa against Tennessee. And then, of course, we have the top four, and then there's a bunch of them that have still not been announced, but we will hopefully maybe get to some of those announcements before we are done.
Well,
So,
let me update you on those. So KU versus UNLV in the Rate Bowl. Yeah, I said that right correctly. The Rate Bowl.
the rate bowl.
Also the Rate Bowl. Yep.
Oh, here it is,
Fresno
the
State.
guaranteed rate bowl. Okay, yeah. Had you said guaranteed rate, I probably would have been. I probably would have been like, yeah, all right, I know. Okay, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so New Mexico Bowl. It's going to be New Mexico State versus Fresno State. So that'll be a pretty good matchup.
Should
The
be.
Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana. That's going to be Cal versus Texas Tech. So that's another
Interesting.
bowl being announced. The Quick Lane Bowl, Bowling Green versus Minnesota. That's just been announced. Of course, we talked about Camilla Bowl, and I think we're caught up with that. So that's a couple more bowls that's been announced since then, since you were talking.
All right. Good, 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 good. Okay, so here we go, Brad. This is going to be the question of the hour. As a matter of fact, I need to pull up the poll that I put on Facebook real quick before we deep dive down into this. While I'm pulling this up, if you are watching this or have watched our past episodes, we appreciate you. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Talking Sports with Nooner and Forrest. You can also find us on Facebook. You can request to be a part of that as well, and we would be glad to have you on. If you subscribe to either one, you will be automatically linked and give notifications to when our episodes will be to where our episodes, excuse me, will be posted. So here we go, Brad. Number 1, Michigan. Number 2, Washington. Number 3, Texas. Number 4, Alabama. This does not include Florida State, who is undefeated. I think one of the big headlines that ESPN had posted was that there were some that believed that Florida State got shafted, and they make a valid argument. They really do make a valid argument. And so before this episode is over with, I'm going. So here is something, Brad, that not many people. You probably know this a little bit more than I. Probably know this a little bit more than everybody else does because you know how I am. You know how I think. I have gotten the top 4 exactly correct every single year that they've posted it out, including this one. Now I'm going to give Shane. Shane is another panel, another host over on ATFS Terrible Football Show. Shane had actually posted this before I could get to it. But when I started thinking about this, because I even shared it with you this morning, that I thought this is the way they were going to do it, and
Yeah.
I've started to think on how this committee thinks and how this committee can make this sort of viewpoint on leaving Florida State out. So, but before we get to that, so there have been a total of 14 votes so far, which granted, I only posted this 2 hours ago. Yes, this has not been a long poll or anything like that. We've had 14 votes in the last 2 hours. The question I got was, did the committee get it right by leaving Florida State out of the top 4? Of the 14 votes, 10 of them said yes, 4 of them said no. I will read. Of course, I don't think they would mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think these people would mind that I read their comments. These three, one of them I was teammates with in baseball. 2 of them I went to school with. Matt Gregory, good friend of mine. He's also a big Seattle guy. Uh, Mariners baseball. He's went to 1,000 games with Mariners
Mm-hmm.
baseball. He's been up there, hockey, everything like that. He's got his daughter involved, everything like that. Got a great looking family. Good guy. He said yes. 13-0, but now that they do not have their quarterback, they would have gotten killed like TCU. That is a very, very, very good analogy, which I also happen to agree with. Because it's like I said, it's the best 4 teams, not the most 4 deserving teams, if you want to put it that way. Aaron Gestring, Aaron Gestring, who I went to high school with at Bauxite. I think they got it right, but it shows the flaw of a 4-seed playoff has no point in going undefeated, winning a Power 5 conference championship, and not having a chance to play for a natty. And I agree with him on that one as well, because that's also that second part of it, Brad, where you can go undefeated and it not matter. And I'm going to get to that, Aaron, because, and I like I said, Aaron agrees that he got it right, but he also sees the flaw in the system, and I also agree with that as well. That's why
Yeah,
I think going to 12. But here's the thing, though, Brad. This is why they need to stay at 12, go to 12, stay at 12, and leave it alone. If that's what
I
they're
agree
going
with
to do,
that.
that they need to just leave it alone after that, because how far else are we going to do? The furthest we could go with this, Brad, is if they do a 64 or a 68 NCAA tournament like they do at college basketball, which they could do. I have actually drawn this bracket up before, Brad. I will do it again just to make people be like, look, this is what the NCAA tournament would look like. Would you see any upsets with this? We'll do that another time. Not today. I don't have time. And then Ryan Duncan, another guy that I went to Bauxite with. Yes, and we'll know when Georgia beats them like a drum. So yes, so he's got a point. So they all have good points there, because it does definitely show in the system. And so that there is definitely a flaw in a 4 playoff system, which that's what we argued with the BCS. But here's the thing, though, Brad, with the BCS, Michigan, Washington would probably be the top 2, with them being undefeated, winning their conference championships respectively. And so, Brad, I'm going to give the floor to you. Did the committee
Well,
get
I
this
want
right?
I want you to comment first because I got some interesting things to say about it. Go ahead. I want you to go
Okay.
first. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I did some
So,
research on this, so that's why I want you to go first.
okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. That is perfectly fine. Okay. So let's take a look at this whole perspective that the NCAA committee has got. Obviously, Michigan, Georgia, no, I'm sorry, Michigan and Washington. There's no explanation needed with those 2, none whatsoever. Let me get a drink of water real quick, because this might take a second.
Yeah. And I would even say the first 3. I would say the first 3. There's no argument.
And yes, and even with Texas, there is no argument.
Right.
So now this is where I think the committee takes everything into consideration. If you remember a few years ago, Brad, I think it was Jameis Winston's last year in college. They were a 3 seed below 2 1-loss teams. And I
I
think they
remember
take
that.
the strength of schedule. They have to really take that into consideration. They had an elite quarterback, because let's admit it, Jameis Winston was an elite quarterback in college, and he's not an elite quarterback in the NFL, but to me, he's still pretty good. So, anyways, but Florida State and the ACC, just in general, if you look at it, they have not been the ACC conference that they were whenever Clemson was on top. And I think everybody could agree with that. We have not really seen exactly what the ACC has any kind of capabilities of whatsoever. So when I look back at this college football season, I have to take a look at everything into consideration, including the strength of schedule, but not just that, but I have to look at the teams that they played. And it's not just who the teams they played, but it's what did those teams actually do in order to get in or in order. And they combine all this stuff, Brad. So I'm gonna actually start with Ohio State because I guarantee you there are some who believe Ohio State could have been a second Big Ten team to get in. Which they would have a valid argument. If you look at, excuse me, Ohio State, according to ESPN, Ohio State had the seventh, excuse me, had the seventh hardest schedule in the entire country. They were number 7 when it came to strength of schedule. Here is where I find Ohio State's schedule to be flawed, Brad. And I'm actually going to pull their schedule up, and I'm actually going to tell you exactly
Yeah.
why I believe it. And Jacob's not going to like this on Tuesday. He may agree with me in the long run because me and him are me and him think a lot alike.
Yeah.
And so we really do. And even though, like I said, even though Ohio State has struggled and everything like that, when I look at their schedule, Notre Dame was a top 10 team at the time, and they did beat Notre Dame on the road.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Penn State at home 20-12. Who else on that schedule did anything at all for their like all season besides Michigan?
Other than you could say Notre Dame being ranked at the top 25 in the CFP playoff, nobody else.
Okay, yeah. I'll give you that. But here's something
Mm-hmm.
else though, Brad. And this
Mm-hmm.
is where the committee, I'm telling you, I think I've got this down to a science, my man. How many losses did Notre Dame end up having? How many losses did Notre Dame end up having this year?
They had 3 losses, I believe, and I think before this weekend's schedule, before the championship week, they had Ohio State in the top 5 in the CFP
Yes, they
playoff.
did.
Okay.
Yes, they did, and yes, they did. I thought they should have been a little bit lower than that, considering you had
Right,
two
I agree.
other teams playing for a conference championship. But I understand where their committee was thinking. All right,
Yeah,
I
right.
understand that. To
I
me,
agree with
Ohio
that
State
too.
had, but to me, Ohio State had no shot getting in the top 4. The only shot they had, in my opinion, was if Georgia, Florida State, and Michigan had lost, then there was a possibility of a little mix. Oh, I'm sorry, and Washington. I think Washington had to lose for Ohio State to even be considered. Because I honestly think, Brad, and I could be wrong, but who do they have at 5th and 6th after this top 4? Was it Georgia and Florida State?
It was Florida State, then Georgia. They had Florida State 5th.
Oh wow, okay. So I mean, like I said, in a lot of ways they probably didn't have a chance. But I'm trying to make this as an example. Notre Dame lost to Louisville, and they also lost to Clemson. And even though, like I said, Ohio State, big time team, big time win, they did go into Notre Dame. They beat a good Notre Dame team. But you look at the rest of their schedule, and I'm talking about the meat of their schedule. And besides Michigan and Penn State, nobody else really did anything. And Penn State lost to both Ohio State and Michigan, which, no surprise there.
Become a yearly tradition.
Exactly. The last 3 years. And like I said, anybody could argue that, they deserved to probably be in the top 4, but they weren't a conference champion. They didn't even play for a conference championship. Alabama, their strength of schedule was ranked number 5, which you could say that, yeah, I agree with that. Let me see here. Where was I getting at? So you've got Alabama, and then you have Texas, which Texas was, I believe, 13th. Yes, they were 13th overall on their strength of schedule. Guess where Florida State was, Brad?
No telling.
55th.
Okay.
They were 55th. Their strength of schedule was 55th in the entire country. Now, this is where Florida State got hurt. Okay. And I want to explain myself so that way whenever we go off of this long distance and everything like that, that way people can understand exactly where I'm coming from. Okay. So Florida State had 2 big wins the entire. Well, I could say 3. You could say Clemson, but Clemson wasn't even ranked at the time. But in all retrospect, Florida State also had 3 top 25 victories. LSU was the top 5 team, which was the beginning of the year. Duke was a top 25 team. They were ranked 16th at the time. And then, of course, Louisville when they played Louisville last night, Louisville was 14th, but even then, Louisville was probably not that great of a football team. And so you look at what these teams did. Had LSU, and I will make this argument until the day I die. Had LSU went undefeated the rest of the season, won the SEC, Florida State's in the top five. Florida State would be in the top four no matter what happens on their roster. Florida State would be in the top four. The same thing with Duke, which Duke is still a good football team, but I really believe because of their lack of schedule, that's why they took Alabama and Texas and they jumped them off. I thought Florida State would stay at number 4 regardless of what happened, but it was the fact that Alabama beat a number 1 team in the entire country. The only loss they had was Texas, and Texas themselves, even though they did lose to Oklahoma, which I'm sure was taken into consideration, you have the head-to-head matchup with Alabama and Texas. Texas did beat Alabama. I understand they had 1 loss. I understand Florida State had none. But it's not necessary, and this is where my whole point's going to get at, Brad. It's not necessarily just about the strength of your schedule, but one thing that builds your strength of schedule, Brad, is what other teams do when you beat them or when you lose to them. When Alabama lost to Texas, they did nothing but improve. When Texas lost to Oklahoma, they won, and most of the time they won convincingly. Yeah, you had a couple of road games that were close, but who doesn't? It's college football. It's part of the whole situation. And so that is where I think the committee gets it right, is because they're not just looking at who you played, they're looking at those teams and what they did after you beat them. So when you take LSU into consideration, LSU was a 3-loss team. I believe that was right. Were they a 3-loss team? Let me look here.
They were a 3-loss team, yes.
They were a 3-loss team. And they had a lot. They had a loss against Ole Miss, and then of course Alabama. Two worthy opponents. But I'm telling you right now, that is the reason why Texas and Alabama both jumped Florida State. Not just because the quarterback was injured, but it was because you have 2 teams whose strength of schedule was so high, and they were more deserving of the top 4 teams. They are the best 4 teams. In my opinion, the best 4 teams got in.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with the strength of schedule argument, because if you make that argument, then you would have to exclude Cincinnati a couple of years ago, because their strength of schedule was in the 80s and they were still 4 seed and went undefeated. So that's that I would disagree with that. Plain and simply, Ricky, the reason why they didn't get in it was the quarterback. It was the quarterback. That because they don't have Travis Hunter playing. I'm gonna read a quote from you, Ricky. This actually came from RG3. I don't really agree with RG3 all that much. I think earlier
I
on he
never
actually
agree with
made my DA
RG3.
list. But here's what he said: Florida State is the first undefeated Power 5 conference champion to not get into the college football playoff. Despite the ACC having a 6-4 record against the SEC this year, despite their defense not giving up 30 points in a single game all year, despite their offense having more yards in the ACC championship than Michigan had in the Big Ten championship, despite holding Louisville's top 20 offense to 6 points, despite beating 4 top 25 teams, despite finding a way to win with their backup quarterback in a bitter rivalry game, despite finding a way to win with their third-string quarterback in the ACC championship game, Florida State earned their spot in the CFP on the field with or without Jordan Travis. You don't punish and diminish the work of 100-plus players and coaches because one player is not there on the field calling the shots. FSU's always answered the bell this year, and their response to losing their quarterback was to play possessed on defense. It's a fact. So anyway, so that was his quote. Before I get to mine, did they get the best 4 teams in? Yes. However, that has not been the case every year, because let's just go back to last year. Last year, the top 6 because I got this pulled up. The top six of the CFP playoff was Georgia, Michigan, TCU, Ohio State, and Alabama, and Tennessee being number six. Ohio State finished second in their division. And TCU, we know what happened to them at the time against Oklahoma State. Alabama, at that time, Nick Saban was going on all these programs, was saying, listen, we only lost by a total of 5 points. That was their two losses. And we are a better team. And so last year's top four, if you look at the top four, was that the four best teams in the playoffs? Probably not. That now, were they the four most deserving? Yes, they were. And so you had that in 2022, 2021. I mentioned Cincinnati, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. That was your top six then. So the question was,
which year was this?
2021. So the question was,
right.
Of course, Cincinnati had the head-to-head win at Notre Dame. I'll give them that. But that was the only win they had in a top 25 opponent. I think later on they had a game against SMU in the championship game, something like that. So the question again is, was it the four best teams? Well, you could argue yes, but really, Cincinnati got their butts handed to them against Alabama. It was not even a close game that year. So again, you have that. Let's go back even further to 2017 or 2016. I'm sorry, Ricky. To here, you had Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Washington, Penn State finished fifth, and Michigan finished sixth. So Penn State was actually the Big Ten champion that had beaten Ohio State in Happy Valley by 3 points, but they had an early loss where they were blown out by Michigan. And I think they had an early non-conference. Yes, they had an early non-conference loss against Pittsburgh, an arch rival. And they put Ohio State in because this was Penn State back in 2017. They won the Big Ten.
Well, yeah, they had two losses.
They had two losses. But my point is, again, was it the four best teams? My point is, if it's always been about the four best teams, the top four would be different every year, Ricky, just about. And so my thing.
So before you move on, let's go this one at a time. All right. So 2022.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you say 2022 was?
2022 top six. I'm reading the top six: Georgia, Michigan,
all right,
TCU, Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee.
Okay, so why would they? Okay, so let me pull this up, Brad, so that way I'm looking at the same thing that you're looking at, so that way we're both on the same page here. So that way I can counter whatever you're saying, because I also remember something about 2021. Okay, so here we go. Let's see. You said 2020. Oh, this is not even. What am I doing? All right, so let's go to 2021. 2022 is not pulling up for me. 2021.
Okay.
Oh wait, I've got it.
I remember.
Never mind. I got it. Nope. Oh, I've got it. I found it. Let's go to 2022. All right. So last year.
Okay.
Last year we had Georgia, Michigan. We had Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State. So now, listen, this is simple, Brad, because the rest of the teams below them had 2 or 3 losses. So yes, those are typically.
Does that matter?
Case,
does that matter? Because here's the thing: Alabama could no. Listen, Alabama could argue during the Tennessee game that Bryce Young was not healthy, and both losses was on the road by a total of 5 points. And again, we're talking about the four. You're saying that the playoff committee is in charge of creating the 4 best teams. The 4 best, not the 4 deserving, but the 4 best teams.
Hang on. Slow down. Now,
yeah. Well, I got
it. Have we ever had a 2-loss team in the top 4? No.
Why should we have not had a 2-loss team in the top 4? Why should that matter? Why should that? That's what I'm saying. If you're talking about 4, listen, Ricky, I got you time. Give me a little bit of time here. If you had 4 teams, you're talking about the playoff committee's whole point is to create the 4 best teams. I agree with you. It is the four best teams this year, but it has not been like that every year. Every year the committee's talked about it's been more or less the four deserving teams. And what I'm saying is not the four best teams has not always got into the college football playoff.
Okay,
If it's always been
I see
about
what you're saying.
so if it's always been about the four best teams, then the whole playoff thing for the last since its inception, even you could argue almost to its inception, has been flawed. And
So
because and again, I'm not saying they didn't get it right because they did get it right. I do think right now Alabama is a better team than Florida State because of the quarterback situation. Obviously, that's correct. But if we're going to argue the four best teams, we should have been arguing with this every single year since the playoff inception. That's my whole point.
okay, so I want to go because remember we're dealing with Alabama and Ohio State in 2021, right?
Yeah.
Because Alabama had a two.
2022.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to 2017
Yeah.
because in 2017 they also had the same thing between Alabama and Ohio State. Ohio State won their conference,
I remember that. I remember that.
but they had two losses and they got Alabama in. It's the same.
And
It's a scenario. It's a scenario. You cannot put a two-loss team over a one-loss team. You can't do that.
well,
There's
and
just
my
there's
question is,
no not with the
right,
Power Five anyway. Now I understand the sub of five. I understand that part. But as far as like I said, to best four teams, whole 9 yards, everything like that, and I understand that. But in the same realm of things, you're talking. There's a huge difference, and I understand that I understand that Bryce Young may not have been healthy one game, that they lost by a total of 5 points, but
yeah,
they still had two losses. They would be hypocritical
but
to have
still,
any
Ricky,
kind of defense, and it's still. I'm just saying, both teams
but that
lost to the eventual conference champions. Alabama, and
I
even though I could argue up and down that Alabama wasn't the better team that year with Ohio State, I could do it all kinds of ways because that Ohio State team was very, very well stacked up, and they lost to a Michigan
yeah,
team that was just that much better. Now Cincinnati. This is why Cincinnati got in, Brad. You ready for it? Wasn't just because they were 13-0. Okay,
they beat Notre
let's.
Dame.
But they beat Notre Dame. How
I
high did they
understand it.
rank Notre Dame?
They ranked them fifth, but here's the thing, Ricky. You argue straight the schedule, and their straight the schedule that year was in the 80s. And so
But we're talking.
it's not about straight the schedule. But what I'm trying to say, Ricky, is the whole point of why Florida State's not in is because their quarterback's gone. That's the whole reason. It's not about strength of schedule. It's not because if Travis Hunter, let's say Travis Hunter played at Florida, and let's say Travis
Mhm.
Hunter played at Louisville. Now, let's say the scores ended up being the same, okay? Same thing and everything else. Florida State's still in. Don't tell me they're not in.
No,
It's
I agree
all
with
about
that.
the court. All about the quarterback. It's not about straight the schedule. It's not about that. It's about the quarterback. And what I'm trying to say is this, Ricky. I'm not including losses, and you pointed out 2017. That Ohio State in 2017 was stacked. And you could argue that they were the better team than Alabama. And my point I wanted to make is this. If it always been about the four best teams, then why has it always been about the four best teams? Because apparently we have had criteria in different years where we've gone with the four most deserving teams. Now, I'm not saying the playoff committee got it wrong. I'm the committee got it right because these right now, if you put Alabama against Florida State on a neutral site, Alabama's going to be it's going to be the favorite. But here's the thing about the playoff too. Remember in the first year, it was also Ohio State won the very first playoff year. They also played a third string quarterback, Cardell Jones was their quarterback
Yep.
at that time. And so my point is having a month or so to prepare for a bowl game with a quarterback is a lot different than preparing week after week. And oh yeah, by the way, next week we're going to have to throw this playbook at you. So my point I want to make is this too. You could make the argument, yes, that Florida State probably would not be as good with their third string quarterback, but with bowl games and with time to prepare and everything else, you just never know with these bowl games. You just never know with the playoffs and etc. as well. And their defense is pretty elite. So my point is this: they got it right with the four best teams. That's no question. There's no argument from my end on that. My argument is the inconsistency of the playoff committee
Okay,
because
that's
what
fair.
I'm
That's
seeing,
fair. So that's fair. Like I said before, though, when you have two losses, you're done. Like you're done with the top four. Like there. That's the one criteria,
LSU
Brad.
won a LSU won a national championship with two losses.
Win.
2007, they beat Ohio State. They had two losses that year. That's the year that remember, Darren McFadden, the overtime game. The year
They had
that you say that Darren McFadden should won Heisman.
That was the only loss they had.
No, that is not the only loss. They lost to Kentucky that year too, in overtime.
2007 LSU team.
Had two losses.
Let me look here. You may be right. It's been a while, Brad. I'm pretty sure Arkansas was their only loss. Let me look it up real quick before I oh crap. I lost the page I was on. Let's see here. I'll find it again. Here we go. LSU. They did lose to Kentucky. I thought they had, but that was a BCS. Nobody cares about BCS. We're talking about the
point.
We're talking, but we're talking we're everybody had two losses or more that year. When it comes to,
I mean, four best teams. Why not put a one-loss team? If that's your argument, why not put a one-loss group of five team that year in the BCS? But of course, that's what's BCS too.
Right. I also understand that because that you and I both know that's why the reason why. Let's see here. That's the reason why Boise State got rejected all those years, is because they're just.
I want to say Boise State was that was the year under Boise State went undefeated, if I'm not mistaken.
I think there was one year they went undefeated, and then I think there was one year where they had that one loss to Nevada, and people are still like, put them in, and I'm like, no. So I'm like,
okay,
no. Give me
2007.
I'm trying to find.
I'm looking at that.
Where? There it is, right there. I think this is what.
Oh, they had Hawaii. I'm sorry, Hawaii was 12-0 that year. Of course, they got demolished.
It was Hawaii, yep.
Georgia.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh, they got creamed, and yeah, it was. They're like, oh, put us in. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let me look at. Oh, where's that?
Interestingly enough, Virginia Tech was also 11-2 in that game, and so was West Virginia. So I just look at stuff real quick.
Anyway, so back to where. Okay, so let's get back to this whole entire deal. All right, so if we look at the history, all right. So, but Brad, here's the consistency though that they have lived with since this criteria, since this formula has been put into play. No two-loss teams have been in the top four, and since then, hang on.
Yeah.
Since then, we haven't had a year where you have a buku of teams losing multiple games. That 2007 season was a weird year because you did have multiple two-loss teams. You had more. That was the same year. I think Missouri and West Virginia were both ranked number 1 and number 2. They get beat in their conference championship games. LSU loses to Arkansas, but they win the SEC championship game, and they get beat because that's how the BCS worked, and that's why we have this top 4 committee now, so that way we can deteriorate. But I mean, and that's the thing, though. It's like. But at the same time, but it's like that's where the consistency has been. So any year that you're telling me about where you have 2 lost teams below 1 lost team, I don't want to hear it because they've been
I
consistent with that
disagree
part.
with that. They've been
They
consistent, but again, the whole quote has been that the director came out this past week. We want the 4 best teams, not the 4 most deserving teams, the 4 best teams. And you
have we
know
had
what?
a 2-loss team in the top 4 yet? The answer is
If
no.
that has, but if that is the case, Ricky, if that is the case, then they have not fulfilled their promise throughout the playoff, during this whole entire playoff era. They have not.
I disagree.
Because you could argue some of those 2-loss teams play tougher schedules than the 1-loss team. You can argue that, Ricky.
Not
And the
according
thing
to
about it is,
statistics.
according to statistics, they haven't played a tougher schedule because that was your whole point.
No.
Is because they had a weak strength of schedule. Was Florida State's weak strength? Was
That's
their strength of
that
schedule?
that was
That,
my that is what I believe the committee did was when you looked at Florida State's strength of schedule. Who did they play? What big teams? I'm telling you, if LSU had won the SEC, Florida State would be in. It's
I
not just
agree with
about who you
that.
play. It's not just about who you play. It's the
But
same
here's the thing.
criteria. It's the same criteria the NCAA tournament committee uses to get in the NCAA tournament for basketball.
But
It's the same
every
exact
year,
criteria. Not only, but it's like, what did those teams do before
but
they played you, and what
that's
did they
totally
do
different.
after? True,
That's totally
but I'm
different
I'm just
because
saying. But I'm just saying
you're
it's the
arguing
same criteria.
69 versus 68.
Yes, that is very true. But I'm just saying in general, it's like I said. If we were to say the 4 most deserving teams, yes, I would definitely put Florida State in there. And I'm telling you, in the years past, when you
And
look
that's
at
what they did in
everything, this is
2022.
this. Hang on though. This is the
Yeah.
first season, Brad, that we've had multiple 1-loss teams like this and only 3 undefeated teams. This is the first year that it's happened. You can go look back in previous years. I think the only year that I remember where there were multiple 1-loss teams that were 6 and 7, I think that was 2 years ago. We had Baylor and TCU with 1 loss each, and it's because they beat each other. And then you look at the rest, it's like, okay, we had the 4 best teams right here. It's plain and simple. But this year we have 7 teams: Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, Alabama, and whole 9 yards. We have 7 with 1 loss or less. We've never had that.
Yeah.
So you have to go by.
And
You have to go by. You have to go by the certain criteria. You have to go by strength of schedule. You have to go head to head. You have to go. Okay, just the same scenario I was trying to tell you guys about a while ago. What did the teams that you beat? Some of your big wins. They take their big wins. Here is their one big win that they've had for the year. Ohio State's was Notre Dame. What did Notre Dame do? They end up losing 3 games. What did LSU do? They ended up losing 3 games. You can't say that about the rest of these teams. Alabama's only loss was Alabama's only loss was Texas. Texas had 1 loss to a good Oklahoma team who probably should have ended up winning the Big 12, but then they ended up getting beat by Kansas a few weeks later, which was hilarious. But it's like, what did these teams do? And when you come down to it, this simple criteria: Alabama beating Georgia, Texas beating Alabama. You can't put Alabama over Texas, so you put Texas, Alabama over Florida State. And
but here's the thing.
it's just that simple of a criteria.
No, then that's the thing. Then, so you come about deserving. 2022, they put the 4 most deserving teams. 2021, they put in the 4 most deserving teams. It was not the best teams in the top 4, and that played out in the playoff itself. I mean, TCU got hammered by Georgia, and probably should have lost
Very
to
true.
Michigan in the first. And so that's my whole point. I'm not saying they didn't get it right with the 4 best teams. All I'm saying is the inconsistency of this committee has been very prevalent for years now. And especially if you're going to say 4 best teams, then you're going to you need to go look back and say, well, that year they didn't put the 4 best teams in. That year they didn't put the 4 best teams in. That year they didn't put the 4 best teams in. You can argue that. You can argue that, but from a Florida
I
State
disagree.
perspective, and here's the thing, Ricky, I'm not a Florida State fan. I'm a Florida Gator fan,
I
and
neither.
I'm arguing for them. And I'm arguing why I think Mike Norvell, by the way, a UCA native, feels disgusted at right now with the committee. Why the
Which
Florida
he
State
should.
AD, why the Florida State AD said this is unforgivable. And here's a question I would pose to you, Ricky. If Florida State beats Georgia, should they have a claim to the national title?
Hell no. No.
Why? Why?
Because
Because
is Georgia
here's the
is
thing.
Georgia in the
A
top
lot of
four?
people,
Is Georgia in the top four?
some people
Did
would
Georgia
argue that.
win their
Some people
did
would argue
Georgia
that.
win?
Some people,
But
some people would argue
according
that
to the
Georgia
uh,
is.
hang on.
Listen,
According to the criteria. According to the criteria,
listen.
this is
Yeah,
what the criteria.
I know
Conference
what the
champions,
criteria.
head to head. Did
Oh,
Georgia win
conference
their
champion.
conference? The answer is yes. The answer
Well,
is
Penn
no.
State won their conference. Ohio State still got the top four. So I mean, in 2017, I mean, conference champions
Did they
don't
beat
really
Ohio
count.
State?
Really, they did beat Ohio
Did they
State.
beat
They
Ohio
beat them head
State?
to head. They
Okay,
beat them head to
that's
head too.
do yeah. And then, but why? But why did Ohio State get in and Penn State not get in? Because Ohio State had one loss.
Because they were
One.
more
It's all
deserving
about the
than
losses.
better.
I'm trying to tell you. It's. I'm telling you. When you
If
can
it's
look
all about
throughout the
losses,
rest of
Florida
history.
State's in. Florida State's going to have
Hang
zero.
on. Hang on. What I'm trying to tell you is, dude, listen. If you would listen to me,
I'm listening.
if you
But
go from the very beginning of this entire thing, by the
try
way,
to.
people, we're not really arguing. This is just the way we talk. We should be in Front Sports Center right now. Now, if you go, your argument is they haven't been consistent. My argument is they have been. If you go from 2014 until now, number one, they've never put a two-loss team in the top four. Number two, we've never had this situation before where you have multiple one-loss
Oh,
teams
Lord.
and multiple undefeated teams. We've never had this. And we could go through each year and I will show you, we will go through their schedules and I will tell you this is what the committee looks at. And at
But
the very end,
Ricky,
yes, you could be right. You could be right. They could have said, you know what? They don't have their starting quarterback. They don't look very good right now. We could look at Texas. Now, the one thing that I will say, Brad, the one argument Florida State has is Alabama getting in over them. I thought at first I thought Texas would get the 3 seed. I thought Florida State would just stay at a 4 seed. But again, it's like, yeah, that could be it. But if you look between 2014 and last year, the committee has been very, very consistent. If you have
disagree.
2 losses or more,
100% disagree.
Let's go through the years then. 2014.
Well, no. Wait a minute. Listen, you said that losses matter. If losses matter, 0 versus 1. Any coach will tell you how hard it is to go undefeated. Any coach will tell you that.
I agree.
And they had some close games even with Travis Hunter. I mean, they had to escape against Boston College to beat them this year. I mean, it's not like Florida State has had no easy games. And really, if you look through Alabama's schedule, I mean, they struggled against us, Arkansas. I mean, we had a chance to actually beat them in Tuscaloosa. And we're arguing
I agree.
Alabama more
I agree.
deserving. And here's the thing.
I agree.
I just think this, Ricky. Did they get the 4 best teams? Yes. I'm not arguing that at all. What I'm arguing is if the criteria has been at this whole entire time been about the 4 best teams, then your whole ranking system in a lot of these years has been flawed because 2022 you had a couple of teams that had 1 loss. Yes, they got in over a 2-loss team, but like Nick Saban said last year, would have they been favored against any of those teams that played in the college football playoff? Probably except for Georgia. Yes, they probably would have been favored in those games. You look at 2021. I mean, you look at Notre Dame and Cincinnati. if you had a simulator of that game being played 9 out of 10, 10 times, Notre Dame, I think, wins at least 6 or 7 of those games. I mean, if you had a simulator, if you played it 10 times over, I mean, that's number two. I mean, and then 2017, you had a team that beat another team that made the college football playoff head to head, did not, and plus they did not also won the conference title, did not get in. So my point, Ricky, is if it's always been about the 4 best teams, then don't tell me about who's deserving, who's not. Just give me the 4 best teams. I understand there's 7 one-loss teams. I would not argue for Georgia to be in, but a lot of people thought Georgia was one of the 4 best teams. And if right now, if they play in the field, if they played any of those 4 teams, they might be favored against all 4 of them. I don't know. I mean, Florida State, obviously, they're not going to be favored. I would agree with that. But again, we're talking about Florida State beating a Georgia team that lost by 3 points to Alabama, them finishing undefeated. And what if Alabama or Texas wins the national championship with the 1 loss?
Georgia's strength of schedule was 37th in the, which, like I said, I understand you got to play your conference game, but this is one reason why, Brad, I think some of these teams, that are on the outside looking in, saying, "Oh, we deserve this, we deserve that." They need to try to schedule some of these bigger teams, because this is where you're going to get to every single year. If let's just say for example, let's say Georgia and Ohio State played each other at the beginning of the year, and Georgia beats Ohio State head to head, and then they lose by 3 points in the national. That raises their strength of schedule up, and so. Yeah, I mean, I see where you're getting at, but Brad, if you go through the years, and I'm telling you, every year they've automatically discontinued 2-loss teams every single year, because we haven't, and I agree. Like I said, yes, it is about the best 4 teams, and yes, last year we saw what happened to TCU. But we also saw what happened to Michigan. We can't forget that TCU did beat Michigan in that first round game. And Georgia's team, listen, I don't care who the heck played Georgia in the national championship game. Georgia was just that good. That Georgia team was probably one of the best college football teams we've ever seen. I thought they were better than the USC teams, because if you remember, those USC teams was all about the big offense they had with Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. Georgia had everything you wanted. They had defense like anybody would have taken. They had what was it, 9 defenders taken in the first round of the NFL draft last year. I got to count it up and make sure that's right. It was either 8 or 9. But it's like this. It doesn't matter who was playing Georgia. Georgia was going to win last year. Like that was the whole case. And yes, anybody could have made an argument with Cincinnati being in there, just for the simple fact is, yes, their strength of schedule is pretty bad, but that Notre Dame, that head-to-head with Notre Dame meant everything. And because Notre Dame did go undefeated the rest of the year, and if you look at the rest of everybody in the rankings, they had 2 losses or more. If you go to 2020, same scenario. In 2020,
I'm not letting count 2020. I letting count 2020 because that's COVID year.
No one counts 2020 with the COVID year. 2019, you had 3 undefeated teams: LSU, Ohio State, Clemson. No argument there. Oklahoma, 12-1. 4 conference champions. 4 teams with 0 loss, 1 loss or less. Everybody else 2 losses or more. And I go through every single year now. And yes, Florida State did go undefeated this year. I get that. I get that, and I see where you're coming from. But yes, the playoff committee has been very consistent. The last time Florida State went undefeated, what seed did they get for the playoff? 3.
And they were undefeated. They were in the top 4, and there was no argument.
They were undefeated. There wasn't an argument, because you had teams around them with 1 loss with a better strength of schedule than Florida State.
You see, but that's not even my argument, though. My argument's not the seeding, because I would have put Florida State number 4. I would have put Texas ahead. I would put them. I would put Texas third because again. But here's the thing about Cincinnati: we weren't arguing that Cincinnati was the fourth best team. We were arguing that they were deserving. I remember that year. We were arguing because they were deserving to be in the top four. That's
But
what we
I'm
were
just
arguing.
but
And
listen, Brad,
that's the whole point.
I
But
I'm just saying the committee has been very, very accurate
that,
over since
but
they've started. Go look at it.
their statement about we are looking for the four best teams has not always ring true in the playoff era. It hasn't because the four best teams has not always made the top four. That's the whole point. Now, has the four most deserving teams made it every year? I would agree with that. The four most deserving teams every year has, including the years where we had the four best teams. Because they were also deserving. This year, you're right. It is different because you do have all these one-loss teams. I agree with that. But you have a team that is deserving to be in the playoff that has went undefeated, played the schedule they play. Oh, by the way, they play two Power Five conference out of conference games. One was a neutral site game, and one was at Gainesville. So they play two, and they can't help it that Florida has sucked the last decade and a half. But anyway, they can't help that.
True.
So the thing about it is, you know, we every year they have picked the four most deserving teams every year. They haven't always been the four best teams, Ricky. And my thing is this year, for the first time, you don't have the four most deserving teams. And this is really the first year where you have the opposite. You had the four best teams, but not the four most deserving teams.
We can agree to disagree. I'm looking at the criteria that they've used, and they've been consistent every year.
And I'm looking at the statement that they made out in public for the press to take on.
I'll give you that much, Brad. But they've been very consistent over the years. There's no argument they've been consistent. They have been very consistent. I have figured this out.
They've been consistent in picking the four deserving teams. The four most deserving teams.
Right. Every single year. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Every single year I've gotten it to a T. Remember that, Brad. Remember that.
I'm not giving. I'm not disagreeing with you.
So
but what I'm saying is,
what I think we should do is us and everybody on the Terrible Football Show needs to get together. We need to band together, send a letter to the NCAA Tournament Committee, and let us decide the top four.
Why not? Yeah, I like that. And here's the thing too. Here's the beauty about it. Next year we go to 12. And here's the ironic thing about this. And I think the ACC commissioner's kicking himself in the foot. They were actually supposed to start the 12-team playoff this year. But it was the ACC commissioner was one of the commissioners that voted no against starting the 12-team this year. That's number one.
He's on the DA list.
That's number one. And number two, thank God we are going to have a 12-team playoff because I will say this. I think there's 9 teams that could win the national. And I would put Missouri in that. I know you. I know.
Yep.
I would put Missouri.
Yep. I'm high on Missouri, man. I'm high on Missouri.
Guess how many losses they got? Guess how many losses they got? They got 2 losses.
2. But I would be high on Missouri, man. You know me, man. I'd be high on Missouri, man. Don't be hating on my Missouri Tigers now.
Well, and the reason why is they Georgia. They play them very close in Athens, and of course LSU was a game that was really a fluke with everything and all that stuff. So
all right, so let's see here. So let's just say So if I'm not mistaken, let's see, 5 and 12 would play 7, 11. Nope. That's not how they were going to. I can't remember how they were going to do the bracket. How are they going to do the bracket? Let me look at the 12 team
playoff. I thought it would be the top 4. It's top 4 now, Power Comp, because remember the Pac-12 is no longer with us. They merged with the Pac-12. Um,
right? Let's see. I'm looking this.
it,
I'm looking this bracket up that they released the other day on
I think it's
how it
top
would. Okay,
four
here we
and then
go.
a Power Five.
So
A
this
group
is
of five,
how
excuse
it
me.
would look. Yes, yes, it would. Well, this is what it would look like if they went straight by the rankings. I don't know what they're going to do with the group. I think it's the best group of 5 winner gets the 12th seed. I think is what it is.
Right, right.
Yes, yes, yes. It is. All right. So yeah, I was right. So it'd be 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, 7 versus 10, 8 versus 9. So this is what it would look like right now. Let's just do this for. All right. Um, So obviously you got the top 4. Then you have the 5 seed Florida State would play Liberty. I would almost argue Liberty would win that game even with Travis Hunter
I
as a
would almost,
quarterback. I
I would
would
almost
pick
do
the
that too.
upset. The
I
winner
would
of that
almost
game,
would too.
the winner of that game would play Alabama. You have Oregon against Missouri. Oh my gosh, what a matchup that would be.
That would be a
Oregon and
good
Missouri
matchup.
would play the winner. Would play the that winner would play Michigan. Ohio State and Penn State would have a rematch, and that the winner of that game would play Washington, and then Georgia and Ole Miss would have a game, another rematch, and they'd play Texas as a 3 seed. That's what we need. That's what we
Yeah.
need.
You
And
see,
then
and that
yes, there
the
and here's the
second
thing.
round matchups. Oh, and the second
And,
round matchups would be great.
and see, and here's the thing. Let me look at these. And here's the thing. Yes, Oklahoma would have been left out of this bracket, which I would almost kind of say Penn State probably need to be left out of this group, or Penn State or Ole Miss, one of the two, I think would have been, in my opinion, should have been left out of this group. There's always going to be some argument.
Now,
There's
next year we're going
always
to argue number who is 12 and 11. That's what we're going to argue next year because the group of 5 gets the 12 seed. I'm going to say
exactly. And I'm all for that because Liberty's been good. Let's see, Liberty's undefeated. You think Liberty needs to be in the top 4? Let's see who they play this year. Nobody.
well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think they should be the top 4, but like I say, this is a unprecedented move by having a undefeated group. And what you're talking about being consistent, you have an undefeated Power 5 school that did not make the college football playoff. If the committee's been consistent, why not Florida State?
Why not who?
Why not Florida State?
No, what are we talking about? I don't understand.
Because what I said is this is the first time that a undefeated Power 5 school has not
Yes,
made the play
I thought. Oh, I thought you
football.
said group of 5. For some reason, I thought you said group of 5. I'm like,
I
what?
might accidentally say group of 5. I'm sorry. I mean Power 5. My bad. My
Yeah, but
mistake.
anyway, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. All right, Brad, you got any DAs of the week?
Well, I do have DAs of the week. My first DA of the week goes all the way back to the Big 12 commissioner for his statement he made at a Texas Tech booster club meeting where he told Texas Tech to take care of Texas. Well, not only did they troll him after that game, after they demolished Texas Tech, Texas did, they also booed him very loudly where he was literally drowned out during the trophy presentation at the Big 12 championship game. So for that, Big 12 commissioner, you deserve my first day of the week goes to you because you're an idiot.
I don't have any right now, which I am sure. I think I had one that was a good one, and I literally forgot about it. I really did. I don't know. I don't know who else to. Oh, I wish I had a good one. I'm
Oh my
serious.
goodness.
I had a good one, and I can't remember what it was. Oh, I'm
Uh,
gonna have to find it. I'm gonna have to find it eventually and see what it is.
oh my goodness.
All right. So let's see here. Between now and then, there will be no bowl games played. I don't think there will be any bowl games played before we
Well,
head
Ricky,
on out.
before we go, Arkansas defeated Duke because we were speaking as that game was being played.
Ooh, yes, 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 yes. Big win for the Hogs. I need to check Wichita State for Nate real quick.
I will
While
say
you do,
this.
let's see.
Well,
Go
just to
ahead and
talk
talk
real
about that
quick,
real quick.
Jay Billis said that this was a bucket list. Attending a game at Bud Walton Arena, it should be on everyone's bucket list because everybody was talking about how the atmosphere was nothing they've ever seen before in this Duke game, which I can only imagine that. And of course, and Arkansas's had some amazing games. Of course, we think about here recently when number one Auburn came in. We think about when Arkansas first entered the SEC, when Bud Walton Arena first opened, and of course they hosted Kentucky when they were ranked number one in Bud Walton Arena. A few times how great of an atmosphere was for those games. I mean, it's just nice to see that Arkansas getting highlighted for that, and also good win for Arkansas. They needed that win. They really needed that win. Hopefully, it helps build momentum for the rest of the season. Oh, yeah, and also too,
Yes.
Kentucky lost to UNC Wilmington yesterday, so that's a
Go UNC Wilmington. Wichita State lost to Missouri today by 10. No shame there, though Missouri did lose to Jackson State a couple of weeks back, but that was their. They also lost to Memphis. Missouri's not a terrible team, but we'll get there. Let's see here. Looks like they have one game. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be. They have one game each the next couple of Saturdays. South Dakota State, Southern Illinois. That should both be wins for them. South Dakota State, though, do not sleep on the Jackrabbits. Those guys can shoot. And then, of course, Kansas, Saturday, December 3rd, Kansas, at Kansas. That's the big one Nate needs to look out for is that one at Kansas. I hope Wichita State beats them. We'll see how that goes. And then conference play will start for them Thursday, January the 4th. I will be in Simmons Bank Arena in a couple weeks whenever Arkansas. Well, I think I'm trying to remember who they're playing. I got to look and see who they're playing. I can't even remember who they're playing. My head is
yeah,
just
really. Yeah, do we really want you to go to Simmons Bank Arena? Because every year you go to Simmons Bank Arena, they lose.
That's not true. They won last year.
What last year? Okay, one out. I don't know. Anyway,
They've won a couple. So they've won a couple, but I think it's like I think we're 4-2 whenever I go to whenever I go to
it's Simmons Bank Arena.
yeah, exactly when I go to Simmons Bank Arena 4-2 and
Alltel
let's see, yeah,
Arena,
we lost. Let's see, we
Verizon Arena.
lost to who did we lose? We lost to Hofstra and
Yeah,
Appalachian State. Those were the two losses that I remember.
yeah.
That we lost to. We play Furman tomorrow, Oklahoma next Saturday, and then Lipscomb. They're playing Lipscomb this year, which will be on the 16th. I'm also taking Shelby to the women's game. Lipscomb is 6-4. Let's see who they play. They've lost to Wichita State by 17. So if they beat us, hey, that's more power for Nate. Let's see here. They lost to UCF. To nope, not to.
Lipscomb, good old Church of Christ School. So good old Church of
Yep.
Christ School there. So
They've lost to
love it.
Wichita State, Drake, Bowling Green, and UCF. That's going to be a tough ball game, though. They've beaten a couple of. Let's say they beat Warford, Chattanooga, Asbury, who I think is like a D9 school. Alabama A&M, they're terrible. Tennessee Tech, they're terrible. UNC Asheville used to be pretty good. Hey, and shout out to James Madison for beating a nobody Keystone Giants, wherever they're from. They won by the final score of 130-59.
Wow. And
James
Villanova
Madison,
lost. Villanova lost to Drexel this past week.
yeah, James Madison, who beat Michigan State at the beginning of the year, they are still undefeated. I don't think they play. They do play at Arkansas State this year. That
Yes.
might be a road trip that we need to consider. February the 7th. That's on a Wednesday. We can't do it.
No, we can't do that.
Why can't you play them on a Saturday?
Northwestern beat Purdue this past for the second year in a row, as they were ranked number one. So, congratulations, Northwestern Wildcats.
Yeah,
Beat
Purdue lost to a 16th seed last year. Nobody cares about Purdue right now.
You're still gonna bring that.
Hey, we beat them in an exhibition game. That ought to tell you how good they are.
Hey, Ricky, I will say this: the last team to lose to a 16 seed, the very next year won the NCAA tournament. So just
very true.
want to go by precedent. So
Hey, I'm gonna lay it down right now. You ready for this? You can write this
Yes,
down. You can take a memory. At December 3rd, 2023, at 4:38 p.m., Ricky Nooner himself said Purdue is not winning the NCAA tournament.
I agree with that. I do agree with that
They
statement.
have no perimeter play. It's awful.
Oh,
It's off.
yeah.
It's awful. They're good. They're a good team. Don't get me wrong, but they're so inconsistent. It's not even funny.
Well, they'll be good enough to again probably win the Big Ten regular season. I mean, I know Michigan State's got to figure some things out, but if they figure it out, Michigan State will be a challenge. But really,
Yeah.
that's Purdue's conference to win, most likely. But other than that, yeah, they're not going to make it far to the tournament. I mean, they may make the second weekend, but that's probably as far as I would have Purdue going, if anything. So realistically,
We'll see. They may play Arkansas
well,
again in the NCAA tournament. Then again, I will pick them to go past this. I will pick Purdue to lose in the second weekend.
there you go. There you go.
All right, Brad. One heck of a show today, by the way. One heck of a show today, by the way.
That's
Really,
great. Yeah, great show.
that
Great
is.
show.
It,
Thank you again.
we
Good
gotta have a
banter.
heat. We gotta have a heated debate every now and then.
Right. And again, one more thing, just real quick. They got the four best teams right, but did they get the four most deserving? That's the question.
I thought Arkansas deserved it, baby.
Right,
Arkansas was
exactly.
4-8.
Of course. Of course, they're four
I
and
will
eight.
tell you, I will still always stand by what I say. Ohio State could be 4-8, and they would still argue they should be in the top four. I'm telling you,
Of
it's going to
course,
happen
they
one
will.
day. It's going to happen one day, and I can't wait till it happens.
Well, you know what? The thing about it is right now, Ryan Day, I guess it looks like he might be there next year, unless the NFL team pursues him, which I guess that could be a possibility. But um, yeah, he's got to figure out his Michigan problem as soon as possible too. Oh,
They could be one of the best teams to start off the year next year.
yep, I agree.
They
I agree.
they could be. We'll get to that. We'll get to that another day. All right. So let's see here. We will start doing. We will probably, Brad. What we'll probably end up doing is we will probably predict all of the bowl games in one show. I'm
I
looking
like
at
that.
that.
I like
We
that.
may wait for the top four until they get there, but as far as regular bowl games, I think we're gonna do all of them on one deal. And yes, I will send a link out to where everybody else can compete with us if they want to. So, all right, Brad,
I agree.
I'm signing off. It's time to go. Y'all have a good afternoon, good weekend, whatever day you listen to us. I hope you have a good day. Goodbye until next time.